In this video, I'll be telling you why it isn't always a great idea to fit the OE tyre that your vehicle came with. This video actually started out as a simple test, an OE tyre versus aftermarket equivalent with a snow-rated mild all-terrain tyre thrown in. But as I went through the data from the dry, wet and snow testing I did, and noise and comfort of course, I thought it actually made a pretty interesting insight into why the OE tyre that comes fitted to your vehicle from factory isn't always the best option. Firstly, I should quickly explain exactly what an OE tyre is. OE means original equipment, and for the vast majority of vehicles sold today, the tyre that comes with the vehicle from the factory will have been tweaked by the tyre manufacturer at the request of the vehicle manufacturer to make it fall in line with what the vehicle manufacturer believes will help it sell the most cars. Obviously, that's their goal. What things are the vehicle manufacturers requesting? Well, the number one request is nearly always energy use. Whether it's an EV manufacturer wanting to get a better range number or an internal combustion manufacturer wanting to get a lower fuel use or CO2 number for tax banding, it's now a huge driving force behind OE tyre development. What else is important to sell cars? Dry handling is disproportionately high on the list thanks to magazines doing nearly all of their testing in the dry. And noise and comfort is another factor that a lot of shoppers really focus on. Finally, I'm sure you'll be shocked to know that the price the vehicle manufacturer pays for the OE tyre is another important factor. Perhaps it's the most important factor for certain categories of vehicles, which is why you're now seeing most manufacturers fitting non-premium tyres, especially on their smaller or base spec models. So now we know what they care about. What do car manufacturers not care about? Tyre wear is certainly one, because it doesn't make them look bad if the tyres that came with your car only last 10,000 miles. It makes the tyre manufacturer look bad. And honestly and sadly, car manufacturers are happy to sacrifice wet grip. As I said, car journalists don't really test cars in the wet. They don't do safety related things like wet braking. So why would the car manufacturer care? I've never seen a braking test on Top Gear. There is usually a base standard for wear and wet grip, but that standard is just not that high compared to modern tyres. So how do tyre manufacturers meet these targets? There are many tricks that tyre manufacturers can employ, and none are easier than lowering the starting tread depth of the tyre, as this is good for rolling resistance, it's good for dry handling, and it's good for noise. That's 3 wins with one simple trick. So as you can imagine, it gets used a lot. Sadly, this nearly always means less longevity for the user, which is not great. More energy efficient or more dry focused compounds can be developed, but these have lower wet performances generally, and obviously they put the price up with the OE program, and that adds to the price of the tyre. Then you get in this feedback loop. So what does this mean to you in the real world? Well, to find out, I ran a test on a Tesla Model Y, and before you click away thinking a Tesla is a really extreme example, it's really not anymore. It might have been once in the time, but now what Tesla are demanding from its OE tyre pattern isn't far removed from what everyone is, and that is low noise, good comfort, good dry handling, and the biggest requirement, as I said, low rolling resistance. The OE tyre I've tested is this, the Goodyear Eagle F1 Asymmetric 5 M+S. This is a strong performing, ultra high performance all season tyre and is a very good base for an OE tyre. You might have already noticed that this Goodyear also has acoustic foam inside. This is designed to reduce the noise further, so as a win for the consumer, and should give it an advantage in noise and comfort, as these two tyres aren't fitted with acoustic foam. The aftermarket tyres I'm using to compare, well, the first one is this, the Falken Zenus FK460 AS. This is Falken's new ultra high performance all season tyre, so it's the same category as this, and it's already done very well in one of my recent tests, so check that out. And then there's this, the Falken Wildpeak AT Trail, which is their mild all terrain offering. The Falken FK460 AS is a heavier tyre than the OE tyre, but it starts with over a millimetre more tread depth, so it'll be an interesting comparison. This tyre is also warranted to 50,000 miles tread life, something this definitely isn't. The Wildpeak, on the other hand, well, this brings the obvious. Far more security off-road, both in terms of grip and puncture resistance. And while it might seem like a bit of an odd combination with the Model Y, almost every active lifestyle CUV or SUV now has a mild all-terrain tyre option. And I do, on a personal level, think the AT option makes the Model Y actually look pretty cool. In a second, we'll switch to me in the car covering wet, dry and comfort, what you're used to. I actually shot a lot of in-car footage for this test, as I thought it was just going to be a normal tyre test. So I've tried to condense it down and edit it so it's a little bit more to the point, which means we're going to have an abrupt start and some of the edits might seem a bit choppy, but the information is there and it's good. You know what? My gosh, Goodyear and Tesla have done a good job. The tyre and the vehicle work together beautifully. It turned predictably. It gracefully broke into understeer. You knew what was happening on the front axle, and when you lifted it, it tucked back in really nicely. And with such
a bespoke tyre, because I've spoken to Goodyear in the past about this tyre, and they put a lot of work into it with Tesla. What chance does just an aftermarket all-season tyre have? Surprisingly, quite a high chance. I didn't think it would. If it was like if the Goodyear was a 10 out of 10, and subjectively we're talking, and the Falcon was an 8 out of 10, I'd have been, that's a pretty good result. I would give it like a 9.5 out of 10. So I don't think the average person would notice any difference in steering reaction, steering input. So what about the all-important grip? Does it improve wet performance? Well, yes, not by much though. I know I said in the intro the Goodyear is an optimized low rolling resistance tyre, so I did expect the wet performance to struggle, but the Falcon was just 1% faster. But then, conversely, the Falcon does have that 50,000 mile tread life warranty and the Goodyear does not. I don't expect the OE tyre to last 50,000 miles. But it was only 1% in handling, but the braking did feel more in line with what I expected, and that was the Falcon was nearly 10% better in wet braking. So what if you want that safety and security and off-road ability, or even just a cool looking tyre, and you want to put an all-terrain tyre on your Model Y or your CUV? Because people do this. Now we are testing more than I like to test at once, more variables than I like to test at once, because not only are we going from an ultra high performance all-season tyre to an all-terrain tyre, also dropping from that 20-inch wheel to an 18-inch wheel. So there's a lot of variables at play, and the wheel effect will have probably as much impact as the tyre effect, but you would never expect an all-terrain tyre to feel as sharp as an ultra high performance all-season tyre anyway. And the car did feel a little bit less dynamic, I guess is the best way of saying. Turn-in was a little bit slower. There was a little bit more wander at the rear of the vehicle, and the lap times and the braking distances, which should be on screen now, were just a little bit worse. But that is always going to happen fitting any kind of all-terrain tyre compared to like a UHP all-season or an OE tyre. That's just what the product category brings, especially with a 2-inch wheel size drop, but let's see how that pays back in comfort. Usually I would stop and then restart in the dry and talk about all the different performances of tyres in the dry, but it was actually very similar. The advantage in lap time and braking distance came back to the Goodyear a little bit, and so did the subjective handling. The tyre was just, because obviously you're loading up more in the dry, the tyre was just a little bit sharper, it turned a little bit better, and you just felt a tiny bit more connected to the road. But I still think the average driver probably isn't going to notice the difference between the two all-season offerings, the OE and the Falcon aftermarket. So good job all round there. One thing you would hope people would notice between a heavily tuned Tesla OE tyre is noise and comfort. So let's move on to that. Well, I never thought I'd be saying this. In a test of road tyres with an all-terrain tyre thrown in, the all-terrain tyre was the most comfortable over the big impacts. But why? It's because of the wheel size. If everything else was equal, I would imagine, I would guess, an educated guess, that the all-terrain tyre would be the least comfortable of the three. But you've got to bear in mind, this Falcon Wild Peak 80 Trail is what we're calling a mild all-terrain tyre. So it's not a aggressive all-terrain tyre. It's designed primarily for on-road use with some off-road safety of an all-terrain tyre. So it's that kind of hybrid blend. So that means they're not built as firm as traditional all-terrain tyres. So you can actually get quite good noise and comfort levels from them for the category. However, compared to against the OE tyre in noise with sound deadening and the all-season tyre with the less aggressive tread pattern, because it doesn't need to go off-road, you could definitely notice a little bit more tread pattern noise. Between the two all-season tyres, the OE Goodyear and the aftermarket Falcon, I'm very impressed with how close Falcon have got, but there is the advantage of the foams insert of the Goodyear and the fact it's probably, the foam's been optimized to work with this vehicle chassis. So if noise is really your priority, I think the Goodyear does have the advantage there. Is it going to be intrusive if you move away from the foam insert tyres? I don't know really, because these cabins are echoey and rattly, so there could be an element on the Tesla, but I think on a normal CUV that doesn't have foam in the OE tyre, the Falcon's a very good option.
Finally, snow. I did promise snow. Now this is a very interesting data set. To be fully transparent, I always have to be. Due to timing, the snow data didn't come from me. I didn't do the testing. It was from one of Falcon's test drivers from an internal test. So I do trust the data, which is why I'm presenting it, but I just thought I'd have to share that. If you've been looking at how the tires look through this video, it's probably not going to be a huge surprise that the Goodyear OE tyre had the worst snow performance. It was 15% behind the Falcon all-season aftermarket option. So that's a significant step, that's snow braking. What is surprising is the AT Trail was another 18% ahead of the all-season, which is very impressive. Now the AT Trail is severe snow rated, which means it carries the 3 Peak Mountain snowflake symbol, and in this case, like, it's performed as a snow rated tyre. A big step ahead of this, but then a huge step ahead of this. The story was similar in traction and handling, though not quite as pronounced as braking, with the AT Trail maintaining its significant advantage over the FK460, which in turn had a good advantage over the OE Goodyear. So now we've looked at the dry, wet, snow, noise and comfort of the tyres. It seems to me, at least on balance, you're probably better off fitting the aftermarket tyre. However, the obvious elephant in the room is rolling resistance. This is where the OE tyre is designed to excel, and in this case, it actually does. It's really good, beating the 18-inch all-terrain tyre by 12% and the aftermarket by over 20%. How important actually is this? Well, it doesn't actually mean you're going to lose 20% of your range or 20% more fuel. The rule of thumb is for an IC vehicle, the tyre is around 1/5 of the car's overall rolling resistance, and for an electric vehicle, it's around 1/4. This means that in this example, fitting the aftermarket tyre will reduce your range by about 5%. But wait, there's even more to consider on this. Remember how I said the OE tyre has less starting tread depth? This is 6.6 millimeters to start with, whereas this is 7.7 millimeters. And remember how I said lower tread depth is better for rolling resistance? I can't tell you exact figures, but I can tell you that when this aftermarket tyre is worn down to the starting tread depth of this at 6.6 millimeters, the gap's going to be closer. And finally, there is the price. At the time of writing, this Goodyear is $350 per tyre and the Falcon is $215. That means for a full set of the Falcons, it's about $860 and you'll only get just over 2 of these. And this is warranted for 50,000 miles and this is not going to last that long. It's not warranted and it's just not going to last that long. So the cost per mile is going to be way different between the two. To sum up, if you want to go off-roading or have serious snow performance, you now know what compromises you'll be making to the vehicle in the dry and wet to fit something like this. This is a very good tyre and excelled in the snow. But what about the more common question? Should I fit the OE tyre or get something more rounded in the same category? This honestly really depends on what you want. There is a strong argument for the OE tyre if you drive an electric vehicle and you're hyper-focused on range or noise. I'm not sure what the math is for the EV, but I'm positive for an IC vehicle, even with this lower rolling resistance, the extra money spent at the pumps using this tyre is not going to be offset by the extra purchase price of this. This is going to be the cheaper overall package. Then you have grip. The Falcon is better in the wet, better in the snow, equal in dry handling, and while it is a few meters behind in dry braking, that again would be closer if they had the same tread depth, because dry braking is heavily dependent on lower tread depth. As usual, there is no right answer with tyres, just individual requirements and performance trade-offs. I mean, that's what we've learned, but there is a tyre for everyone, I guess. Anyway, let me know what you think below, and as always, safe motoring.